Greetings everyone, I am Dr. J. I was supposed to have a review prepared this week, but due to family matters, moving back to college, and outright laziness, I'm afraid my internally declared once per 3 weeks rule has officially been broken. However, even if I'm a lazy bastard who tomorrow is going to have a lot less time on his hands, I can at least talk about what I've been playing and give you an idea as to how my opinion is coming along. For this video, I won't be talking about the game I'm reviewing for next week, so that you have something to be surprised by. So to give a small hint, it's a sequel in the vein of Descent 2 to something I've reviewed already. That might be too specific, but I'm sure we'll find out before too long, won't we? So, now that the waffling is over, let's talk about a couple of games that I'm making significant progress in, starting with Populous: The Beginning. For the uninitiated, this is the third game in the Populous series, which were the first God games. The original was a game I found interesting, though given how much there is to our video games now, it seemed more like a tech demo that I would make for a class project rather than a full-blown release. Though, given what we see on Steam Early Access, that might actually be acceptable, but that's beside the point. Before it is asked, however, I did look at the sequel and didn't think they added in enough to where a review of the game would be productive. They added a nice Greek god theme, but apart from some new spells, it was fundamentally still the same game. I didn't think another 7-minute video rehashing the same talking points would be interesting, so instead I skipped straight to Populous: The Beginning. And honestly, that was the right move, because this game is radically different from the original. Instead of being a management game and pseudo-progenitor to Dungeon Keeper, this game is much more like a real-time strategy game. Instead of being able to move freely and cast powers as you wish, you now have a shaman who seems to be trying to ascend to godhood, and must defeat anyone and everyone standing in her way or trying to do the same. There is a degree to which your people will act on their own, but they will sometimes just be idle, and you'll need to give them something to do, such as residing in a home to improve it, or building new structures, or fighting hostile tribe members, and so on and so forth. Where this really works is the theme, as each map takes place on a small globe, with the camera wrapping around really nicely. It's a bit finicky to position, but the ambient music and the overall look and feel are really well done. I haven't gotten to see every power in the game, but there's enough variety thus far to be interesting without being too dull. What makes it work really well, however, is the fact that you now have more choice as to where your mana is allocated. Before, the amount of people you have give you a flat amount more mana to work with the goal to be scaling up faster than your opponent and using your powers to mess with them. Now though, you still get a set amount of mana based on how many people you have, but now you have to choose where that mana is allocated. It's a small distinction that I find to be really interesting, as it then becomes a balancing act between getting cheaper powers to start out, while still working towards something big like a lightning strike or earthquake. There aren't too many different kinds of units, but each one has their own little use that makes them interesting to work with. Perhaps the most interesting case is the Preacher, where instead of physically fighting, opposing tribesmen will sit and listen to him speak. And unless you send your shaman or another preacher over there to teach him some manners, your people could end up being converted to the opponent's cause. It's a nice way to force unit diversity while sticking to the theme, though it does seem strange when you have a group of people fighting over there and then a peaceful sermon within walking distance of that fight. However, I am seeing a couple of problems. To start, the controls are a pain to use properly. The unit pathing isn't too bad, with some exceptions, but moving around the world and properly selecting the units you want can be a bit tricky, especially with how they handle groups. You can left-click to select a unit, as you would expect, but instead of right-clicking to move them or select an enemy to fight, they instead right-click to deselect, meaning I'm having to relearn how to do a ton of stuff. Another problem is that, much like many old-school games, key elements are often not well explained. For instance, you can't just plop a building down wherever you feel like it, as otherwise you could unfairly take up resources or occupy space in an enemy village that might cause said enemy problems, even if you don't finish building it. The way they set where you can put buildings is based on where your shaman's respawn point is, as well as by guard towers. They also don't do a good job of telling you what those guard towers are supposed to be used for, which in reality depends on the kind of unit you put there. It'll give preachers increased range for their speeches, the shaman increased range on her spells, and the warriors use it as an alarm, but nowhere is any of this explained in-game to my knowledge. If that isn't the case, then I would gladly know where it's stored, though given Dungeon Keeper, my answer will probably be in the game manual, which of course I haven't downloaded because I'm still not used to doing that despite playing more than one game that does expect you to read this stupid manual. My own personal inadequacies aside, I don't think it's the strongest game I've played, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't having fun with it. As something to chip away at while listening to a podcast, it does that job alright, though the fact that I would feel the need to listen to something while playing it could be an indicator that it wasn't good enough on its own. Regardless, I'll need to spend more time playing it, both with and without something in the background, and we'll get back to you when I make more progress. Given where I am now, this will probably be the next game I review after what I upload next week, unless something changes in the next few weeks. College is starting back up for me after all, so who knows how much time I'll end up having. Either way, as another thing to distract me from Populous, I also decided to stretch the limit of my 5-year rule even further with Batman Arkham Asylum. And yes, this game is over 5 years old, and I didn't believe me either the first time I looked it up. The reason I wanted to talk about this one is because this is where the Arkham combat system started. It's kind of interesting though, because in many ways this game seems very much akin to the Star Wars video games, where because they weren't beholden to the source material's plot, they were able to create some really interesting ideas using the property. For those who don't know what Arkham Combat is, it is a system of combat that's used for fighting small to large groups, where you are a single character that bounces between multiple opponents. If you want a more recent example, see Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor's combat. Anyway, I may be showing my hand too early by saying this, but my interest was less in the source material itself, as I'm not the biggest Batman fan. It's not that I don't like the character, but I didn't grow up with comic books, and since my first introduction to the character was the Adam West version, everything else looked off-putting to me at first. At the time, I would never have known that it was a silly parody when the real thing was so much more serious. In more recent years, now that I've seen more of the character, I can appreciate him as such, but I tend not to enjoy darker or depressing storylines. When I'm in the thick of it, like with The Witcher, and I feel like I have some control over the matter, I can do just fine. But when I'm looking to sit back and enjoy something outside of video games, I usually just want to be entertained. Which means when it comes to comic books, I tend to gravitate more towards something like Iron Man or The Flash. The reason I bring this up is because the theme is probably why I haven't been as interested to play it, and probably why I'm not finding it as compelling as others right now. Since Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor is the closest comparison I have, and the game's control schemes are virtually identical, it's hard not to make comparisons that are probably unfair given the gap in time between them. It also doesn't help that I love the Middle-earth setting, even though I know for the lore junkies it ends up trampling all over said lore. Again though, enough tangents. I think you know how I feel about the setting, so how's the game? Well, thus far, as I mentioned, it feels very familiar. Though given that I have played other games using the Arkham combat system, I can definitely tell this was the first iteration. It doesn't feel like I'm meshing with it the same way that I have other games, but on the whole, the premise is a good one, and I don't think I've explored enough of it yet to start criticizing the gameplay too much. Though I keep going on tangents about how the setting isn't my favorite, I'd be lying if I said it weren't well executed. It's hard not to love Mark Hamill's Joker. It's hard not to like the sense of exploration and mystery. And it's also hard to stop hearing voice actors that I recognize. Once I wondered why people would always get so annoyed when they saw actors used in so many different places, but now as I've grown up playing video games, I understand that pain. Although, to be fair, that might be an advantage when it comes to making fun of the game, because now I can't stop seeing Random Guard Number 5 as Wolverine, and I can't stop seeing the Asylum Director as Admiral Yularen. I don't even care which role came first, I keep expecting to hear him start complaining about General Skywalker or something. So, did that section make any sense? Probably not, but that's the problem with starting to talk about a game after only a couple hours of playtime. I'm sure that later down the road I'll have more interesting things to talk about, but for now, that's all I have for this video, so thank you all for watching. Please like and share this if you find it deserving, and subscribe to this channel for when the next review goes up, as well as other content posted on a pseudo-regular basis. In other news, as a quick reminder that at the time this video goes up, it will be the last day for me before my last semester of college starts up, so content will be more sporadic than usual because of that. I will have much more control over my content once that I'm out and away, but that's not going to be the case for the next few months. I fully intend to keep up with the reviews, but I make no promises for when they'll end up being published. So, on that note, I better finish that other game for next week, and I'll see you all later.